can see already. So thanks for tuning in, and we will record our episode here in a few minutes. It's just gotta now we got YouTube up and running. So if you guys haven't already, obviously make sure that you guys are checking us on all of our social, um, and we'll go from there. So let me just get Facebook open on my laptop so that I can post out that we're doing a live record. I just want to give a quick shout out to a couple people. We got Chris and Amanda watching, so thanks guys for tuning in. Um, I haven't done a live stream since last year, so I do apologize that maybe it's not as crisp and as nice and neat as has been in the past, but we're trying to get this all back up and running. I think that's it's a little bit bigger. And Josh wants to talk about the. I'm going to say this now. I am very sad to hear the news that we lost somebody driving one of these haulers out to Phoenix for the ARCA series. But this is where I have a little bit of an issue, and I get it. People want to see, oh, what happened with the hauler and this, that, and the other. But did we really need to see the image of the hauler wrecked? I think there was. I understand the intention behind it, but there's some times where it's like we could live with that. My personal opinion, obviously, but I think we could have lived without it. But it is a tragedy that the gentleman that was driving that rig for David Golan Racing lost his life. That is a tragedy there. All right, so we're good there. Let me get this going. What is going on here? All right. And of course, I clicked on the wrong thing. Let's go back. Here we go. And like I said, if you guys haven't checked out already, you can check out the Crew Chiefs Corner podcast wherever you get your favorite podcasts. You can also check it out right on the Facebook page, there on the main page. And also, if you go to thecrewchief.net, which is our website, you go to crewchief.net and you can check out the podcast right on there as well. Josh said we needed to have the evidence for the first responders. Yeah, but I mean, did we need my point with what I was saying is, do we really need to share that information in a sense that Bob Pockrass is out there grabbing it and sharing it, on Facebook, it or on Twitter actually. I just there's certain times where, and it kind of goes back to, if you go all the way back to 2001 with Dale Sr., I mean, I know there were some newspapers that ran with Dale Sr.'s autopsy photos, and we remember how that all panned out. So I just think there's certain things in life that you really just don't need to see. And I think that was one of those things. And I'm not saying it's Bob's fault. I mean, I'm sure it's public information. I'm sure he got it from a public information request, and I'm sure he got it the right way. I'm not trying to, insinuate anything that Bob did wrong. I'm just saying I personally wanted to share that. I'm not going to share the photo. We'll touch on it a little bit about the tragedy. But I just think the photo is just it's just not worth sharing it. I just think that once I heard that there was an accident, I was like, okay, well, I'm sure stuff's gonna come out. And then when you see the wreck and you see all the damage and you see the cabs basically gone of that truck, and you just it's the worst case scenario. So it's just that's when I'm like, okay, maybe we shouldn't have shared that. That's all. And I do understand, Josh, what you're trying to say. I mean, I understand that you're saying crash. Yeah, we've seen the Dale Senior crash, and it's been replayed. You could go on YouTube and search it right now if you really want to, and wreck. You could watch it you can watch it on repeat if that's really what you want to watch. So, um, I don't know. There's certain things, like I said, it's just I think people gotta be selective. I mean, if you want to, reshare what, um, you want to reshare, the David Gillen statement where they were, known, they were involved in an accident, the hauler was, and acknowledge that there was a wreck. That's one thing. But I think, once the information started trickling out that there was a severe accident, obviously there was a fatality involved. I think at that point in time, the sharing of photos needs to really be taken under a little bit more of a consideration. I even think that they would have to think about that. I mean, look at what NASCAR did, Josh, also too, with the Ryan Newman record in the 2020 Daytona 500. If you actually go back and look at the full race, they've scrubbed it out. They have scrubbed out Ryan Newman's crash from the full race replay of the 2020 Daytona 500. So it's very interesting how they've done it, but it is what it is. All right. With that said, let's get into our second episode here. So I just got to get on here, and we're not gonna beat around the bush today. We're just gonna get right on into it. For those of you that are listening on Facebook, I do recognize that you're going to get a little bit of a different sound quality because it's recording on my phone versus recording through the laptop. So you're not going to get the same quality audio that you would get if you're listening on Twitch or on YouTube, but that's just the nature of the beast. If I run all three websites on the laptop, it like takes the picture quality and makes it horrendous. So that is why I do it the way I do it. All right, what is up, everybody? This is Bobby here, the Crew Chiefs Corner podcast. We are bringing you our second episode of season 3. We are live recording this as well, so we're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, and we're on Twitch as well. So thank you guys so much for tuning in on our live streams, and also for those of you that are going to check out the Crew Chiefs Corner podcast, wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, you can also, like I said before I came on to start recording, you can check us out on our Facebook page, and we're also on the crewchief.net. All platforms that you can listen to this Crew Chiefs Corner podcast. So really, we haven't done a podcast since we did our kind of like our preseason one. We talked a little bit about the off season. We got you guys a little bit prepared for the Daytona 500, and then we didn't do anyone after that. So I do apologize for not being on the last couple of weeks. Just been busy, been transitioning into different roles at work, and it's been a little chaotic. So recording time was not there, but at least now we have some time. We can go back and we can recap Daytona. So we're going to talk about the Daytona 500. We'll talk about the first race with this next gen car. I know a lot of people were kind of on the fence with it. People were a little bit suspect of whether or not this new car was going to work great on the track. What was the on-track product going to be like? Yes, there are some flaws with this car. I'm going to be the first person to say I think, NASCAR kind of botched it a little bit with this flat tire situation. I mean, I can't understand how this didn't come up during testing. I just don't get it. I just don't get you spent as much money as NASCAR spent in developing this car, and you have in-house tested this car. So one of the things we talked about on the podcast on our first episode was that, NASCAR kind of went a different way with this particular generation car than they have in years past. This car was originally, was going to be slated to come out last year. We all know with COVID and everything like that. I'm not trying to beat a dead horse. But one of the things that happened with that was that NASCAR needed someone to take the charge with this particular car and really work on building it and doing a lot of the research and development work on that. And that was done by Action Express. Now, for those of you that aren't really familiar with the IMSA world, Action Express is actually owned by Jim France. Okay. Now, Jim France is the guy that's basically running NASCAR right now, and he's also been running IMSA for years and years and years. So NASCAR basically handed this over to Action Express and let Action Express work on this car. They built their own chassis as well, and they were taking it, and they were doing a lot of the testing where they would bring a driver in, a current Cup guy in, and they would go out and test the car. And a lot of that was, like I said, done by Action Express, and that was a way for Jim France to keep his people employed with that race team and that organization. And that's where I don't remember how long ago it was, but NASCAR said that the IMSA community, if they wanted to build their own cars, they could do that. That NASCAR was going to open it up to them as well, and it didn't have to be someone that had to be a current NASCAR team charter holder that could build the chassis. So that was sort of the beginning of how they let Action Express take over this process for them. Um, because NASCAR had a ton of layoffs going on and things like that, and they just, with COVID and stuff, there were just so many limits and restrictions on who can be in the shop, what can be in the shop, things like that. They were able to do it through Action Express and keep all those folks employed. So I understand why Jim France did this the way he did it. But overall, the consensus was going to be that this was going to drive really great in the road course, and we didn't know what we were going to getting into getting it into, the Daytona 500. What was going to be the challenge? What was going to happen? The car came down to Daytona. We saw some decent drafting. Obviously, the speeds on this car are going to be slower because NASCAR has really made the horsepower on these plate tracks a lot less. And I shouldn't say they're restrictor plate tracks because they're not restricted anymore in the ways that we were more accustomed to back in the 90s and the 2000s. These cars are now run a tapered spacer, and that's what's really controlling and restricting the amount of horsepower these engines are able to run. So you have, I think it's 490 horsepower at Daytona versus a 670 package that they're running the rest of the season. I think minus Atlanta. I think Atlanta's going to run the 490 as well. So the cars are a little bit slower. I don't think that's a bad thing, but like what we ended up seeing at Daytona was we did see a car get airborne during the Daytona 500, rolled over, and Harrison Burton was able to walk away from it, and it was fine. Conversely, you go back and look at the Saturday night race. Myatt Snyder had probably one of the nastiest looking wrecks that you'll see at Daytona, and he was able to walk away from it. And that car is basically, a Dale Jr. graveyard piece. That's what that car is now. So definitely, a lot of positives, I think, with this next gen car, as we saw in the first three races. But there's definitely some opportunities. I do think that I do think that the flat tires add an interesting dynamic. Guys have been getting stuck. I do think NASCAR is going to have to do something with that. I think they're going to have to try to figure out, what they can do. But these guys, I mean, if you get a flat tire and you get stuck, you're losing multiple laps, and you're basically, your race is over. For the most part. I mean, I know there was a scenario, what was it? Daniel Hemrick made up like 7 or 8 laps one race. And it's been exciting. And I think it's been exciting because this car is harder to drive. You look at, previous generation cars. I mean, you've seen guys that that we all know can't drive. Okay. There's certain drivers. I'm not going to mention names, but you guys know who they are. Could you imagine Danica Patrick driving this generation car? I mean, she'd probably back it into the wall every single race. I'm just saying, just using one example. But, and I get it. Danica's probably a better race car driver than I'll ever be, but, why not? Why not, just make that statement? But anyhow, I do think that this gen car is harder to drive. And even the experienced wily veterans, such as a Brad Keselowski, such as, Chris Buescher's not really that much of a wily veteran, but there's been guys that have struggled with this car. I mean, Kevin Harvick struggled for some races. So I do think that this next gen car has presented its challenges, and I don't think that that's a bad thing that our veteran drivers are struggling. I do think that what it's going to lead to is going to be an amazing season. And I think this season is going to be, I wish that Fox didn't use that the greatest season ever last year promo, because I do think this year might be even better than last year. And they used that damn promo last year. And I think they used it a year too early, if you ask me. But, we'll see what happens. But yeah, I just think overall, just first impressions of the next gen car has been really good. And I think that, for all the complaining that NASCAR fans do, and I know not all of you complain, there's a lot of people that are very, very even keeled. They're happy with what's going on in the sport, but there's some of you that just complain no matter what. And for those of you that do that, I don't know what do you want them to do? You want them to turn back the clocks and go back to the 80s and run the cars, the old, boxier style cars, and that's what you want? I mean, I don't know. I just think NASCAR has got to get with the times. I think running the 18-inch wheels. I do understand the single lug nut versus the 5 lug nuts. I understand the trepidation with that and the hesitation with that a lot of fans had. There was a lot of people that were upset about that move. But look at some of the things that have come because of it. We've had loose wheels, we've had issues, we've had the guns become a problem. We saw that out at Auto Club with William Byron's team having an issue with one of the pit guns. So those things are happening, and that's what's really making this next gen car such an interesting watch. And I think once we get into the teeth of the season, a lot of the newness of this is going to wear off, and you're probably not going to see a lot of the mistakes that have been made early in this season. And when I mean the mistakes, guys spinning out the cars and some of the other stuff that's been going on, some of this stuff's going to dissipate, and maybe the races do get a little less entertaining. But I think right now it's almost can't miss TV if you're a fan, and I think that's why the attendance was so great at Daytona and Auto Club. I didn't really get a chance to really look at anything at Las Vegas as far as crowd goes because I didn't really get a chance to watch that race at all. I did see bits and pieces of Daytona. I did see bits and pieces of Auto Club, but I didn't get a chance to see Vegas at all. So, but I'm assuming the crowd was pretty decent at Vegas. So we'll see what as we continue to go down the stretch here. But like I said, I just think overall next gen car is good. And we'll talk about what else we're going to talk about in this episode. So we'll give you a full race recaps of Daytona. We'll go over the truck race. We'll go over Xfinity. We'll go over the Daytona 500. Obviously, some really interesting race wins. Zane Smith picks up his first win with Front Row Motorsports in the Truck Series. Then you have a great win. When you get to the Cup Series there with Austin Cindric, a first time winner there. And then the Xfinity race, I mean, it was wild. We had Myatt Snyder's wreck, and then you also had a first time winner there in Austin Hill. So a big win for Austin Hill. Moves up to the Xfinity Series full time. He has some Xfinity experience with Shiggy Hattori's team, but driving for Shiggy Hattori versus driving for Richard Childress Racing is a little bit different. So some big wins out there. Then you go to Auto Club. Obviously, the Truck Series are now off for a few weeks. So you just had Xfinity and Cup out there. Xfinity is going to be an interesting season this year. I really do think that some of these guys are going to be tough. I mean, I think, you look at Ty Gibbs, Ty Gibbs is one of the favorites, right? We know that he's going to have, one of those years where he's just going to take off and he's just going to run with it. And that's where I think the problem lies, is how good is Ty Gibbs going to be this year? And, I know he didn't win at an Auto Club and he got his win at Las Vegas, but, Ty Gibbs really is going to be the guy that I think a lot of people are going to look at and say, my goodness, like, how are we going to compete this year? Yeah, how are we going to get these race wins in? And I think that you look at the Daniel Hemrick, you look at AJ Allmendinger, you look at some of these guys, and I'm really starting to wonder how they're going to click wins off this season. Because if Ty Gibbs is going to be as good as he's already been, he's got to win within those first 3 races. And if that's like the clip that he's able to click off, then I think guys like Justin Allgaier, Josh Berry, some of those guys are going to be in trouble. And that's where I kind of really get a little bit nervous, for some of these fringe guys, I look at like one of those fringe guys for me is going to be Landon Castle. I mean, I know a lot of people were like, "Oh, Landon Castle is going to be great this year." I think Landon Castle is going to struggle to get into the playoffs if that's really where he's going to, if that's really the goal for Kaulig, and it should be the goal driving a Kaulig car. At this point in time, you should be able to go out there and win in that Kaulig owned car. Whether you're AJ Allmendinger or whether you're Justin Well, I mean, Justin Haley won in that car. I mean, Allmendinger's won in that car. You look at other drivers that have been in there; they've all won races for Kaulig. So, Daniel Hemrick, the pressure's on him this year to get some race wins. I think Daniel Hemrick's going to win a couple of races this year. I really do think he's going to get there. Um, you know, but I mean, Auto Club, the Xfinity race was pretty exciting, um, in some sense because you had a little bit of some interesting storylines. I mean, yeah, Cole Custer ran away with it. I know he's the dominant car, but then you look at Noah Gragson, had a shot at it. Trevor Bayne was in the mix. So you had some guys up there that, are going to compete. And that was the other thing that kind of surprised me was Trevor Bayne came back. And he's got Devotion Nutrition as a sponsor. So that was quite a surprise there on Saturday for Auto Club. And then then you had your Sunday race, which Kyle Larson goes out there and gets a win. Just shows up late in the race and just all of a sudden takes over. You think Logano's got this race won, and all of a sudden Larson comes out of nowhere and just blows by him, and then you get that late race caution, and Suarez you think's got a shot at it, and then all of a sudden it's not Suarez, it's Kyle Larson that gets the win. So we'll talk about that, and then obviously Las Vegas we'll talk about as well. A big win for Alex Bowman. Kyle Busch was pissed off about that. But I mean, when isn't Kyle Busch pissed off about something? So we'll get into that. We'll get into the Saturday race, what happened with Ryan Sieg and Ty Gibbs. I'll give my opinion. Full disclosure, for those of you watching the live stream, you already know what side I'm going to be on. So, my buddy Ryan, and I really hope the penalty hammer doesn't come down today. But we'll get into all that. So what we'll do is take a quick break here on the Crew Chiefs Quarter podcast. For those of you that are on the live stream, we'll just keep chatting. And then when we come back, we will discuss Daytona and everything that happened during Speed Weeks 2022 at Daytona. This is the Crew Chiefs Corner podcast. I'm Bobby Bailey. All right. So I figured what we normally do on my live stream that we haven't done in a while is usually I share a diecast or two. Now, the one thing that's going to be different this year versus years past is I'm not taking these cars off the base, just because I just don't want to. So right here, what we got, and it's on Facebook, and I'll show you a little bit further back for those of you watching on YouTube or also on Twitch, which I think this angle kind of works out good. This first car I'm showing you guys is the 2021 Austin Dillon Daytona dual race winner. This is an autographed model. This came from the RCR store. So this is a pretty cool car. I just got this in a couple days ago. So really excited to add that to the collection. And for those of you that are into diecast, one of the ads that are going to play during the break that the podcast listeners are going to have to hear, that you guys don't have to hear, is about my buddies over at Circle B Diecast. So if you go to circlebdiecast.com, you use my promo code, which is Crew Chiefs Corner, you can get free shipping on all U.S. orders over $20 within the continental United States of America. And that's a great deal because shipping costs a ton of money these days. So go Crew Chiefs Corner, all one word, no apostrophe in Chiefs. It's all one word. Crew Chiefs Corner, and you'll get to, like I said, get free shipping. So that particular car, this car was only on the RCR store, but you can get that same model on circlebdiecast.com. And like I said, just use promo code Crew Chiefs Corner, and your order over $20 will ship for free within the continental US. So I think that's a great deal. So I just want to give a quick shout out to a couple people watching on Facebook. We got Dan, we got Daryl, and Robert. Hey, how are you guys doing out there? I see a lot of people popping in and popping out, so that's okay. We are just letting this first part kind of upload into Anchor, and it's already done. So that's in. Got that. And then also later today, I'm going to update the website. So if you go to the crewchief.net, you'll be able to see um, the podcast on there, and you'll also be able to check out all the latest news and information on there as well. All right, I'm just waiting for a couple things here to load. I realized the one thing I didn't have up was my da, 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 da. I didn't have my stream manager up from all right, cool. All right, so we are now going to get back into the episode. So for those of you listening along here on Facebook, we are going to get back into the episode. Da, 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 da. All right, everybody, this is Bobby here at the Crew Chiefs Corner Podcast, bringing you our Daytona 500/Speed Weeks recap. So really and truly, we had a pretty interesting Speed Weeks. I think overall it was a good Speed Weeks. A lot of action in all three races. I don't really think that there was a bad race this year. We've seen some duds in the past. I know some people are going to be a little bit down on the Daytona 500 just because, there wasn't maybe as much excitement as there's been in years past. But I do think if you look at Friday night's truck race, obviously Zane Smith got a win. That was huge for that team. For Front Row Motorsports. I mean, last year, I know Todd Gilliland got to victory lane at Coda, and they tried really hard to get some wins later in the season. But for Zane Smith to go there and jump in that truck and get a win right out the gate with Love's Travel Centers on there after winning the Daytona 500 the year before on Michael McDowell's Cup car, those are some really neat storylines that you just sometimes don't get in other sports. And we got that last, few weeks back now at Daytona for Zane Smith and a big win for him. And, I think you look at this season, and one of the biggest things that we talked a little bit about was Johnny Sauter going to G2G Motorsports, which is Glory to God Motorsports, which is Tim Vaines and that organization. And I kind of said it with my podcast that I did with my longtime co-host and my partner on this deal, Rob Hill. I said to Rob, I said, I really I don't understand why we are getting Johnny Sauter with this G2G team. And it didn't make sense to me. It just flat out didn't make sense. I wasn't really aware of why they thought or why Johnny couldn't stay at ThorSport other than sponsorship issues. And I believe that that's what exactly it ended up being, because Ty Majeski is going to be there full time, and he's driving the 66 truck, which they just renumbered from being the 13. And he's got Joe Shear Jr. He's got that entire team, where Johnny Sauter's now got the part-time team, and he's got Junior Joyner as his crew chief, who sort of came out of retirement to do that. So it'll be a little bit interesting to see how that all works out. But Johnny really struggled in that truck and just did not flat out have a good night. And their team truck, the 46 truck, failed to make it. And then they put Matt Jaskol in the 47, which Sauter ran at Daytona. And then Matt Jaskol DNQ's out at Vegas, which was their second race of the season for the truck series. And, Brendan Poole was supposed to drive the 46 truck. Brendan Poole makes the race. Matt Jaskol fails to qualify. And then it ends up that they turn around and put Jaskol 46 because he's running for truck points. So, it's just, I don't know. I don't know what they're doing. But that was one thing that I just didn't understand this offseason. But like I said, it's all about the sponsorship money. We've talked about that on this podcast a lot. I just think people sometimes make some really head scratching decisions. But then you get to the Xfinity race. So the Xfinity race really was the deepest field we had in years that I can recall. I mean, we had 47 cars at Daytona. I can't remember an Xfinity race where we had even that many field, coming in to race. I mean, that was a lot of cars to show up um, for Saturday's race. And it was a great thing to see. What it did do is it really did put a damper on some teams. Like I know Mike Harmon Racing failed to make the race with both of their cars, and Mike Harmon's team had a penalty this all season because they went to a charity event and they ended up bringing some current cars that they could have raced in Xfinity. They had some cars that were older that weren't NASCAR, weren't eligible anymore to run in NASCAR just because of the age of the chassis, things like that. So they had a couple cars that were more current that they could have raced, and those cars showed up at this charity event, and NASCAR decided to penalize Mike Harmon Racing. Well, the monetary fines were dropped. I think there was a suspension or something of a crew chief involved. That got dropped. But what didn't get dropped was the 75-point penalty. So I believe the 75-point penalty was applied to just the 74 car. It wasn't applied to the 47, if I remember correctly. So the 74 is down in the whole 75 points to start the season, and D and Qing at Daytona put them behind. Unlike last season where we didn't have practice and qualifying every single week, this wasn't as bad of a situation as what Jordan Anderson faced last year and the Bassett brothers faced last year when they failed to qualify for Daytona. Those teams basically effectively were shut down until you got to the first new race, which was much later in the season when we went to COTA for the first time ever. So, some of those things sometimes snowball on you, but I know Daytona, not a really good start to the season for Mike Harmon Racing, but a lot of the teams you expected to get in got in. You had some people that were locked in that probably might have missed the race otherwise, got in. But it's just the nature of the beast when you're switching owner points around and you're playing the game. You can lock yourself in that way, and that's basically what some of these teams did. I mean, I'll be transparent and say that's 100% why RSS Racing this offseason put Kyle Sieg in the car number 28 with the owner points from the 39 coming their way. So that would lock Kyle in, and basically Ryan would have to qualify his way in, as would the 38 car, which ended up being CJ McLaughlin. And you get those deals, and CJ was able to make the race too, which was kind of interesting because if you remember a couple years back, I think it was 2 years ago, 2019, when Ross Chastain failed to make that race, and they had to use the RSS 38, which Jeff Green made the race in on. They had to use the RSS 38 to have Chastain in the field because otherwise he wouldn't have gained driver points for that race at Daytona. So it's just interesting. Every once in a while, you get one of those oddball D and Qs, but there was really no oddball D and Qs this time around. So I think overall, the layup to it, to the start up to it was pretty good. And then, like I said, you ended up with a crazy race. I mean, just overall, just an exciting race. And like I said, a big win for Austin Hill. Myatt Snyder, what a heck of a wreck. I mean, that was by far one of the craziest wrecks I've ever seen as far as an Xfinity race at Daytona. Probably almost as wild as Kyle Larson's wreck in 2013. Now, there was some crazy stat that I saw, and I don't remember what it was. But was it the guy that won in 20 when Larson wrecked? Who the heck won that Daytona 513? I'll remember it. But they were going to say that there was going to be, a certain driver was going to win the Daytona 500, and I was like, whatever. They were trying to make something happen, and I was like, whatever. But you got a big win for Austin Hill. Like I said, here's a kid. I remember when Austin Hill was basically driving for Young's Motorsports, which at the time Young's Motorsports was actually co-owned by his dad. Had a piece of that action with Young's Motorsports. And I remember Austin driving for that team, and I remember saying to myself, man, this kid's, I mean, what the hell's going on here? How good is this guy going to be? And it really wasn't until he got into Shiggy. I mean, he didn't drive for Shiggy and started having success. He had success before he got to Shiggy's team. And, he was driving for, man, I'm forgetting what team he drove for. But he turned a lot of heads, and then he got into Shiggy's equipment and really started shining a little bit more. But Austin Hill has really turned the corner. And, going to Richard Childress Racing, he's got that sponsorship behind him. He's got United Rentals behind him. This year, he's got Bennett Transportation on his car. And he also, I think, has some other RCR sponsors that are going to join that team this season. But I would watch out for Austin Hill this year. I think he's going to be sneaky. I think obviously, he's going to be in the playoffs with the race win. But I think he's going to be a sneaky guy. I think he's going to be somebody you're going to have to keep your eye on as far as when we get to later in the season. I think he's going to have a real shot at this deal. So pay attention to Austin Hill. Now getting to the 500. Overall, not the most exciting 500. I recognize that, but a pretty good race. We had a lot of action. It was kind of ironic that Brad Keselowski was wrecking people, and Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is giving an interview saying how terrible Brad is at driving and how, the only way Brad was going to win the 500 was by wrecking people. And I sat there and I said, boy, that's the pot meet the kettle. Pot, kettle. I mean, I just don't know what the hell Ricky Stenhouse was. I know what he was referring to. Brad had a rough race, and Brad was definitely causing accidents. I mean, hell, he was the one that caused the Harrison Burton wreck. But what I don't understand is Ricky Stenhouse goes out there and says that, and he doesn't expect people to get on social media or anywhere and just get on him about it. And Ricky, I mean, I think Ricky is smart enough to know that, he's wrecked a few people to win races before. And I don't think he really cares. I think he's honestly quite proud of that sometimes. But it was just ironic to see, Ricky say something like that after all the wrecks he's caused in his racing career. We all know about them. So that was a little bit interesting. But then you get to the end of the race, and you really do think that Ryan Blaney's got a shot to win this deal. You think Blaney's in the catbird seat. There's no way in hell he's going to lose this race. And here comes Austin Cindric and just takes care of business and goes out and wins not only his first race, but a Daytona 500. So a big win. We get back-to-back years of first-time winners in the Daytona 500. I don't even know if that's happened a lot in the history of the Daytona 500. Obviously, a huge win for for Austin in his career. And here's another thing. Like, you just think about Austin Cindric and how the last few years have gone for him. I mean, there was a point in time, I look back maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, realistically, when Austin Cindric was, I think, 17, 18, he was kind of like, getting his groove going. He was in the Truck Series, starting to get into Xfinity. I really do think that you look at his career and his trajectory. Here is a kid that was probably on the path to race sports cars, probably on that path, and his dad decides to take him down the road in NASCAR. And I don't know where the deviation in this came from, but because Austin was an accomplished road racer, and he was probably going to be a very good world-class style, world championship level caliber talent in the sports car world. To take him and go into NASCAR and see him struggle the way he struggled when he first got with Brad Keselowski Racing, he was driving those trucks. To see him get to Xfinity with Penske and see him struggle in those cars and see him perform well perform well on road courses and really mightily struggle on the ovals. I mean, I remember a podcast that I did a few years ago when I said Austin Cindric, as long as the races, as long as there's the Roval, has a shot to go out there and win that Roval race every single year and could probably put himself in the championship mix, if he ever figures out how to drive an oval track. And that was the same season. He goes out and he starts winning races. He won that doubleheader at Kentucky back in 2020, and everybody all of a sudden starts saying, well, here comes Austin Cindric. And it was 2020 that really turned the tide. But I remember when he came in 17, 18, he was struggling those seasons. And all of a sudden, it's like the light bulb switched at Kentucky for him back in 2020. And that was really what changed I think his trajectory in this series in a big way. So a big win for the Daytona 500. Roger Penske's third Daytona 500 win. Obviously, the first two, one the 2008 with Ryan Newman, and then obviously he had the other one with Joey Logano back in 2015. So his Roger Penske's third Daytona 500. So then what we're going to do is we're going to move on to Auto Club. So we headed out west for the first time since 2019, and the Bowman curse was in effect the last couple seasons. And for those of you that don't know what I mean by the Bowman curse, so Alex Bowman's curse started really at Chicagoland. He goes out, gets his first Cup win. He wins at Chicagoland. What happens is the track closes down the next season, and probably is not going to be heard from again. As far as NASCAR goes, I don't want to say that the track's getting demolished, but I'm just saying probably NASCAR's done there for many years to come. The next place he goes out and wins at is Auto Club Speedway. Goes out and wins at Auto Club, and guess what happens? The track is all of a sudden off the calendar for 2 years because of COVID. Then he goes and gets he won 3 races last year, so he wins a race at Dover. Dover loses a date. He goes out and wins at Martinsville. Martinsville shortens a race to 400 laps instead of 500. And then I'm trying to remember where the hell his first one of the season was at. But if you look, every race that Bowman has won at, it's Pocono. Pocono lost the date too. So every track Bowman has won at has lost the date, modified the race, or has lost the date. That's the Bowman curse. So I don't know what the hell's going to happen in Las Vegas. I hope that that's not where, they get the stupid idea to take, a date away and give it to Nashville Speed Fairgrounds. I hope not. I don't think they're going to get the fairgrounds done in 4 years, but whatever. Teach their own that deal. But you get out to Auto Club, like I said, Saturday, the Xfinity race, basically Cole Custer's to lose. He had the right car. That car came right out of the shops at Stewart-Haas. That was not a car that Bobby Dotter really prepared. Maybe some of the crew guys worked on it and stuff like that. But, the first win for SS Greenlight Racing in its history. So a big win for Bobby Dotter. I mean, you got to give the guy props. I mean, it's the same thing. Like if you want to go back and look at the history books, Austin Dillon won that truck race at Eldora, driving a truck that was actually owned by the Sieg family. So, it's great when these organizations go out and get a win and, sometimes, have other drivers driving for them and maybe sometimes other teams using their team as a proxy to field an extra car here or there, AKA what Dale Jr. did at Richmond for Sam Mayer and BJ McLeod Motorsports did that at Richmond. They used Sam Mayer and they just slapped him in the 78, which was technically a fifth JRM, a fifth or a sixth JRM car. They just slapped the 78 on it instead of an 8 and kind of had fun with it. And Sam that day had a pretty good race going at one point. He was up there mixing it up for the win. But anywho, as we digress back into Auto Club, really a good race for Cole Custer. I mean, Noah Gragson, you feel for him. He wants to get wins. He wants to prove that he deserves the opportunity that Colleague Racing and what Beard Motorsports has given him for 2021. 2022, I should say. So he should be proving to you why he deserves to be at the Cup level. And he's getting there. He's not there yet, but he's getting there. And we'll see what happens. But big win for Cole Custer, big confidence booster, I would imagine, especially coming off of a tough rookie year a couple years ago and then having a rough year last year. All the Stewart-Haas cars had a rough year. So just to go out there and regain that confidence and to really go out there and do what you need to do in order to win a race, they're not easy to win. I could sit here and tell you all day about that. They're not easy to win these deals. Whether it's Xfinity, trucks, or Cup, you got to be on your game. There's a lot of really good drivers out there that can take it from you. So I think overall, a nice win for Cole. Good run by Noah. Great run for Trevor Bayne. I mean, here's a kid that was out of the sport the last year or so. Came back, ran some truck races with Nice. I think that was back in 2020. Kind of showed some glimmers in the trucks, but the Nice stuff is not maybe some of the greatest equipment to be in. It's decent equipment, but it's not the greatest. So we didn't get a true, I think, sample size of what Trevor still has left as far as ability goes. I do think he's going to compete for race wins in these 7 races that he does have with Joe Gibbs Racing and its Xfinity car. I think he's going to make more out of this opportunity than what Ty Dillon made out of his shot with this team. With Joe Gibbs Racing a couple last year, really, I think that this is going to be a better outcome for Trevor, and I hope that this parlays into some other races that Trevor's able to do. Maybe it's some other Toyota teams, maybe a Sam Hunt Racing or some other organizations that are looking to, bring in talented drivers to evaluate their programs. And we'll see how that pans out for Trevor. But a good, solid third place run for Trevor Bayne with a really good car. And then you get to Sunday with the Cup guys. Big win for Kyle Larson. But I mean, the storyline of the day was Tyler Reddick. Eric Jones was up there mixing it up. We had a lot of different drivers up at the front of this field, and this was really the first race that you could go and look at the next gen car and see the difference between this year's car and last year's car. If we were at Auto Club this year with last year's car, this would have been Kyle Larson's race, and he would have probably walked away with it probably much earlier in the race. But because of the back and forth, we got to see guys like Eric Jones up there. We saw Tyler Reddick up there running the top line. Tyler Reddick was dominant in this race too. Make no bones about it. He was actually there, and everybody knows now who Tyler Reddick is. And I do think that this is going to be this kid's year. He's going to get a race win this year in Cup. It's probably going to come at Darlington, maybe at Homestead Miami Speedway. Maybe he wins both at both places. I do see this kid getting those race wins. And I really think that it's his time. So a big win for Larson. It locks him into the playoffs, which we already knew he was going to be in anyhow, just based on I didn't see him fading away this year. Just didn't see it happening. But Larson gets the win. If that caution doesn't come out, I don't know if Larson wins that race if that caution didn't come out. I think Suarez had a pretty good shot. But man, it was a tough one. Tough loss for Reddick, though. He had a really tough loss there in the sense that he really didn't get, he didn't get a fair shake at it. So we'll just leave it at that. I just don't think he got a fair shake at it. He had a flat tire, and then, Byron, William Byron gets loose behind him and runs into him. Go figure. Then we go to Las Vegas. So Las Vegas, we had all three series in action. We had a great race for the truck series on Friday night. And, I think overall it was a decent race. Am I really surprised by any outcome anymore in this series? Not really. The truck put on a really good show. And, you look at, the way this season is going to go, I think the trucks are going to put on a great race every single time out. A big win for Chandler Smith. I think, he is starting to prove that he's probably a little bit better, at least as far as the truck series go, than what we saw when Harrison Burton was in this series. And was it Harrison and Christian Eckes that were driving the two KBM trucks, and they were really struggling. We saw that. But I think this year it's going to be a really, really interesting season. And I think you're gonna have to go through Kyle Busch Motorsports to win this championship. I think Chandler's gonna mix it up. I think you go down here and you look at it. Chandler had a really good race. He led 32 laps. He actually led more laps than his boss did. Kyle finished second. Stuart Friesen up there, so you know how good those Toyotas are going to be. And I think at some point in time, Stuart Friesen's got to show up and run well enough that he could compete for some of these deals. Great run by Ryan Preece, finished fourth. Tanner Gray had a good run too. That's big for him. Matt DiBenedetto, solid run in that Rackley War truck, finishing sixth. Brett Holmes, how about Brett Holmes finishing eighth? I mean, that's huge for that team. Guy that just doesn't get in there every single week. Ty Majeski with a top 10. Austin Wayne Self. I mean, here's a kid. God, last year he was wrecked, right? And this year he's out there getting a top 10. So good for him. But then you go down the list and you see some guys that, are going to have some rough years. But, I think the biggest shock was Obviously, the disqualification for Zane Smith. He did technically finish the race in second, but he got disqualified. Um, so it is what it is with that. And then, you had some people struggling down there. I mean, you had Ben Rhodes, had an accident, so a tough night for him. There's a few of them out there had some really tough races, and it's going to make a difficult year for some of them. So then we get to the Xfinity race, and I really do want to spend some time on the Xfinity race. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break here on the recording side of it, because I got to chop this up, because otherwise it gets too long in Anchor. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a break. We're going to come back, and we're going to talk about Xfinity at Las Vegas and Cup. This is Crew Chiefs Corner Podcast, hosted by Bobby Bailey. All right. I will say this. I think that Ryan Sieg, could have gone about the wreck a little bit better, but I think overall he was in the right. I mean, Ty Gibbs is going to, has a history of driving with reckless abandon and doesn't show respect to his competitors, and he's going to have issues if he can't, give guys space on freaking lap 4. I mean, I just don't know what the hell this kid is thinking. I know what Ryan was thinking. I just don't know what the hell Ty Gibbs was thinking. That's sort of where I struggle with that. So for those of you that are checking out on Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, on the live streams, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. We're going to try to get back on the horse here and do this every single week, and launch new episodes and do a live stream every single week. So hopefully, I know today's episode is not as crisp and clean as they have been in the last season or so, but they'll get a little bit crisper once I do them a few more times. All right, let me just see if this thing finally did. All right, guys, we are back here on the Crew Cheese Corner. Once again, I just want to thank everybody that's tuning in on our live stream. So for those of you that are listening to the podcast, wherever you're listening, you can check us out live on our live recording. We are on Facebook, facebook.com/the Crew Chief is where you're going to find the Facebook live stream. Obviously, if you go on Twitch, it's twitch.tv/Giants, like the terrible football team that resides in New York. 02122 is the username. It's Giants 02122, and that is the twitch.tv/Giants 02122. It's how you listen to us on Twitch. And then you can also catch us on YouTube. Just search Crew Chiefs Corner and you'll find our YouTube channel, and you'll get to the page from there. So we are now going to talk about Las Vegas, the Xfinity Series. We already talked about the truck race and the big win that one Chandler Smith had. So now we get to the Xfinity race, and now to the point where I wanted to talk about this. So apparently we had a race a little bit of an interesting start to this race. We had a accident between Ryan Sieg and Ty Gibbs, which resulted in damage to Ryan Sieg's car and basically took Ryan out of contention for mainly any kind of a really good finish for the day due to the damage to the car. So Ryan goes out and I don't want to put words in Ryan's mouth, but I think Ryan was very upset in the interview he gave during that rain slash snow break, whatever was going on there. Um, he then decides to tell people that it may or may not be done, and then goes out and tries to attempt to wreck one Ty Gibbs. And instead, what he does is he takes himself out, and he took out, I believe, Brett Moffitt as well. So I mean, not Brett Moffitt. He took out the two-car Sheldon Creed. So not the smartest decision. Ryan Sieg had to go see the NASCAR officials and had to deal with that from there. So Ryan had sort of a tough deal. I apologize to my Facebook users. I'm going to sit, relax a little bit back on the chair here, but um, I just think that Ryan had enough. I mean, he flat out had enough. He was done with Ty Gibbs for the day and just was like, I'm done dealing with this nonsense. It's too much. There's too much going on here. Um, it's not the first dust up that Ryan Sieg has had with a driver. If you've watched a podcast long enough, or if you've listened, you guys know about what happened between Ryan Reed and Ryan Sieg at Pocono. I mean, there was basically, to summarize that situation, was a kid that had a lot of money. Ryan Reed had about $7 or $8 million of sponsorship money from Lily's Diabetes to put that car on the racetrack, and that's what they were paying Roush to put Ryan Reed in that car. So to make a long story short, these two guys have had at it for a couple weeks, and one thing led to another, and they're punching each other during a rain delay at Pocono. So that was really the first time I think we've seen Ryan's aggression. I mean, there's been other times that maybe the media hasn't picked up on, but that was the first really big instance where Ryan kind of showed his anger. I've, as someone that's listened to Ryan's audio quite a bit, radio quite a bit during going to races and stuff, Ryan does have a little bit of a temper, but I wouldn't say it's a bad thing. I think it's one of those things that all these guys have chips on their shoulders. I think Ryan's is probably not nearly as bad as the Kyle Busch chip that he constantly has on his shoulders. I think there's some that are worse than others, and I think, like I said, I think Kyle does a little bit of a worse job with that. So, I don't think Ryan did a bad job in this situation. I think what makes it tough is Ryan kind of made it harder on himself, and that he went out and tried to wreck him. So, that really did make it difficult. And, I think the other thing that doesn't help Ryan is that he gave a TV interview that aired on television. And he said, and when he's asked, "Is this done?" He said, "Well, it might be done." That is what you don't do. And that's why you get the trip to the NASCAR hauler, and we'll see what happens with penalties as we record this on 4:30 on Tuesday afternoon. I don't know what's going to happen, but what I will say is that it's going to make for a very interesting. It's going to make for a very interesting couple days for sure. And major penalty that's going to come out against Ryan, but you never know what's going to happen. So hopefully the NASCAR gods are easy on him, and they just, maybe fine him and don't suspend him, but I just don't know what's going to happen with that. So, but I do think that Ty Gibbs has got to use his head. At the end of the day, I think Ty Gibbs has got to be a little bit smarter. Lap 4 of the race is not the time to be going out there and trying to wreck somebody and do something really stupid. I think there's a lot of ways that you can kind of avoid that situation as you would. So, um, it is what it is when it comes to that. Getting to the Cup race, obviously, a solid win for Bowman. I mean, here's a kid that a couple years back you didn't even know that he had the talent to win races. Because when he was driving for BK Racing, some of these other organizations, all he saw was 30th place finishes. And I think this goes back to where Bowman, yes, he's lucked into some of these wins. I would remiss if I didn't say that. But what I will say is that I think Kyle Busch kind of went off the deep end once again, and I think Kyle's just being Kyle. I mean, I think he's being honest with people, which I don't think you can penalize somebody for being honest. But what I can say is that I think Kyle is taking it to a level that it doesn't need. And I what I mean by that is I think Kyle's saying that all Bowman has done is luck into his wins. I don't think that's necessarily true. I do think that Bowman has been opportunistic, and I think that if you look, there's been some times where every single one of these guys has quote unquote lucked into a win. So I don't think that this is unique to just Bowman. I think there's a lot of these wins that happen year to year, and I think that Kyle's got to recognize that he's probably lucked into it during his lifetime. So call it for what you want, but I think Kyle Busch just really had no leg to stand on. And what do you drive back with? A wrecked race car. So, what else is new with Kyle Busch? But, like I said, an important win for Bowman. I think this makes a statement early in the season that the Hendrick cars are going to be a force to be reckoned with. I mean, if this is any indication of what Bowman did last year, he's probably going to steal a couple this year from guys that might have gotten wins that won't get wins now because of it. So we'll see. We'll sort of see what happens. But I think Bowman's going to be a little bit more prepared for this year in the playoffs. Hopefully he's going to make a deeper run than he did last year. But he's going to be tough. He's going to be a tough one to knock out because he could go out and any given Sunday go out and get a race. So just I would be really lenient if I tried betting against Alex Bowman this season, making a deep run. But overall, like I said at the beginning of the podcast, I think this next gen car has been phenomenal. I think there's been a lot of really cool races so far. I think the races have been very exciting. I think the on track product is a little bit more than what NASCAR could have expected, but I think that's a good thing. I think NASCAR has done a really nice job with putting this car out there, and I think it's finally something that the fans are going to relate to. Finally, something that you could look at and say, "Wow, I could go out and buy that Ford Mustang that's sitting in that showroom, and they look basically like the same car." So I think NASCAR's hit a home run with this. There are some tweaks, but there's always going to be tweaks, and I think NASCAR, had to make one at Daytona with the skew on the cars. And we saw how that kind of changed things a little bit, but I think overall these teams have done a great job with getting these cars assembled. Hopefully the supply chain issues get a little bit easier, but we'll see how it goes. So I know we talk a lot about underdog drivers, underdog teams on this podcast, and one of the things that I don't think it gets more underdog than NY Racing this past season. So NY Racing comes out and announces they're going to run a car this year, and I'll be the first person to admit I did not think in a million years that this team was going to make the race. They got and hired Greg Biffle, and I am a big Greg Biffle fan. I'm not nearly as big of a Greg Biffle fan as some people out there, but I will say stick with the Biff. He goes out and qualifies for the Daytona 500, has a great run. I think finished in the top 20 with that team. What a hell of a finish. I think those guys really just had a smooth, solid race. And then you go out there and they make the race at Las Vegas and have some mechanical issues, but could have been offering for another top 20. So a good race for Greg Biffle as well. And then we get this really crazy news today that we get. There was a David Gilliland racing hauler driver that was involved in a tragic accident. See if I can get a little bit more about the details of it. But obviously, if you go on Facebook or Twitter, any social media, you're gonna see this no matter where you go. And so Steven, I think it's Steven Stotts was a co-driver on the ARCA number 17 team, and he was involved in an accident this morning in near Longview, Texas, and he succumbed to those injuries and passed away, unfortunately, as a result of that accident. And then the other two individuals that are on board the truck, which was John Zaveri and Michael Mizell, in the transporter were treated and released from a local hospital, so they were okay. But our thoughts are definitely with David Gilliland Racing and um, those folks. It also doesn't give an update on whether or not they're going to race. They're going to run the race or not with that ARCA car out at Phoenix. Um, but looking at the transporter, it looked like there was one car that they were able to get a look at. I don't know if how damaged it was or could have been, but I would imagine that they're going to make that decision in due time. But definitely a tragedy there with Steven Stotts, and our thoughts and prayers are with his family and friends, and like I said, the rest of the David Gilliland Racing team. That's a real tragedy to have someone pass like that. So. Um, it's a tough deal. But that is part of driving these trucks up and down the highways and getting them to these racetracks. And there is a risk involved, and those guys know what that risk is. Those things are not light, and things can go wrong driving a tractor trailer, whether it's transporting an ARCA car, a truck, a Cup car, Xfinity car, or your groceries. Driving those big rigs is a risk. And unfortunately, Stephen Stotts has lost his life because of that. So, um, tough one. But on some brighter news, Strange Racing is going to run 8 Cup races. They're going to run, I believe their first race is Road America, and they're going to be sponsored by Digital Gold LLC. They have a former Formula One driver um, going to be driving that car. So that is going to be a little bit interesting there. I don't know. I don't want to butcher the name. So give me a second here. I want to look the name up right real quick. But it is on our Facebook page. Give me a second here. It's just how computers are these days, guys. It's got to load. It is Tarso Marquez. So Tarso Marquez is going to drive the number 79 Dignity Gold Ford Mustang for Team Strange Racing. Their first race is going to be at Road America on July 3rd. So that's going to be an interesting one. Jeffrey Earnhardt is going to drive for Joey Gase and Patrick Emmerling. So Emmerling Gase Racing will have the 35 with Jeffrey Earnhardt in it. I believe that's this weekend out at Phoenix. He's got Dale Strong. It's a cookware company. Is going to be his primary sponsor out there. And then Forever Lawn, which has been one of his supporters the last couple of years, will be a co-sponsor on that car as well. So that was really the big news as far as NASCAR goes for the last week or so. And then we'll see what happens. The Cup Cars, Xfinity, and Truck Series. Actually, I think it's just Xfinity and Truck. I'm sorry. It's just Cup and Xfinity that are heading out to Phoenix. I think every year we go out there, it's kind of an interesting try to figure out who's got the car. We've seen some guys that have won championships in the past go out there and struggle. So I don't think that Larson's necessarily the favorite to go out there and win, but Larson's damn good everywhere he goes. But I wouldn't sleep on Chase Elliott. I wouldn't sleep on Truex. There's a couple others I wouldn't sleep on. Probably like a Ryan Blaney, maybe a Kevin Harvick as well. There's going to be a lot of people watching that race to see who's going to have something for the championship race. So when they come back in the fall. So that's going to do it for this episode of the Crew Chiefs Corner podcast. Like I said, thank you guys so much for checking us out, whether it was on the live streams, whether it was on the traditional podcast. And like I said, you can listen to us wherever you get your favorite podcasts. You can also listen to us on our social media on Facebook. And then you can also go on thecrewchief.net. You can get all the latest news and information there. You can also listen to the podcast right on thecrewchief.net. So as always, thank you guys so much. Appreciate all the support, and we'll catch you guys next week here on the Crew Chiefs Corner podcast.